Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com. Today we are in round 2 of the 2015 Sinquefield Cup. Probably just the most ridiculous tournament all year. We have 10 of the best chess players in the world. 9 of those are actually ranked in the top 10. So it's pretty crazy. Today's featured match, we have Fabiano Caruana. In my opinion, one of the best up-and-comers, young guy who I think is going to challenge Magnus Carlsen in the future for kind of the best chess player for many, many years to come. He's actually playing under the American flag for this tournament, which is pretty cool, especially since this tournament is in the United States, St. Louis, Missouri. His opponent, none other than Magnus Carlsen, the current reigning champion. So going to be a really good match. What's interesting about this is both of these players lost in round 1. Fabiano Caruana lost to Levon Aronian. He was playing the black pieces in that match. And then Magnus Carlsen lost playing the white pieces in round 1 to Topalov in a pretty disappointing round 1 where he had an advantage, let it slip away. So going into round 2, both of these players looking to get back on track, needing a win to make sure that they are climbing up that leaderboard. And some of these players are really, really going for it. Definitely already have a couple wins on board. So we'll go ahead and get into it. Fabiano starts out with pawn to e4, pawn e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop here to b5, getting into the Ruy Lopez. There's a ton of ways that black can respond to this, but we do see the Morphy defense with pawn to a6, bishop back here to a4, knight f6, and then castle on the king side. Now Magnus Carlsen has a few options from here. He always has the Russian defense, pawn to d6, pretty common. He has the open defense if he wants to go ahead and take here on e4, just blow up the center of the board. He has your classical defense, the bishop to e7, castle on the king side, go from there. Decides to go for kind of the unorthodox archangel defense. You don't see it super often. Pawn to b5, forcing the bishop back, and then bishop here to b7. Just kind of prolonging, getting his other bishop involved into the game, castling on the king side, opting more to make sure he controls this long square diagonal here with his bishop on b7, thinking that, okay, this is kind of more important than even the king safety right now. Pawn to a d3, a bishop here to e7, getting ready to castle. Not too much threats on the black king, but decides to go ahead and castle. Knight here to c3, castle on the king side, and then pawn to a3. And Fabiano had a decision. He could play a little bit more aggressive than pawn to a3. Could have played knight to d5 if he wanted to, bishop here to e3. All nice development moves. One's a little bit more aggressive with knight to d5, really putting his opponent to the test. But as you kind of saw through this game, it kind of looked like Fabiano wasn't quite as prepared for the archangel defense. Not sure if he just didn't expect Magnus Carlsen to play that. But all in all, Magnus Carlsen was playing much faster in this game than Fabiano was. After Fabiano plays pawn to a3, we see pawn to d6, just completing this pawn chain right here. Rook over here to e1, and then queen to d7, completing the development for Magnus Carlsen. A knight back here to e2. Kind of looked at it and said there's no place for this knight to really go here. So decides to go ahead and maneuver it over to the king side. Just try to start an attack on the king side. So knight to e2. Knight back here to d8. Magnus kind of looking at the same thing. Doesn't like any of his options really, so decides to go ahead and move over to the king side as well. Knight to g3, knight here to e6, and then bishop to a2. This is just kind of a waiting move. It's not really improving the position too much. Not really under any threat right now, but just kind of kicking back here to a2, just saying, hey, if anything is going to happen, I'm just going to kind of wait and see. Maybe wasn't prepared for this opening as much as he would have liked, so this is kind of a safe move, still controlling the same thing, and he can kind of feel Magnus Carlsen out to see which direction he wants to go. Rook over here to e8, knight up here to g5, pawn to d5, Magnus Carlsen has, again, that pressure on the light squares in the center of the board, especially with this knight over here on f6. So putting a lot of pressure. Bishop, knight, and queen right here can always swing his rook over here to d8, put even more pressure on this important d5 square right here. We see knight taking up here on e6, and the queen's going to recapture, and then bishop up here to g5, pinning that down. After pawn to h6, Fabiano decides to go ahead and capture here and give Magnus Carlsen the double bishop pair. So for the rest of the game, Magnus Carlsen is going to be looking to kind of open this board up. Right now, it's kind of clogged with pawns in the center of the board. That's not really where bishops are going to do really well. Bishops are going to do well when there's a lot of space. They can control a lot of the board. So this bishop right here, it's kind of blocked in with the pawns, so it can move one square forward. This bishop right here, it's not doing too much at all. So that's kind of Magnus Carlsen's plan. Caruana, on the other hand, he's going to try to continue to keep it clogged up. It's going to be somewhat difficult just because there can be very easily Magnus Carlsen can just trade off material right here. But he's going to try to just continue his pressure as well in the center of the board. So queen here to f3, adding another defender kind of on this d5 diagonal right here. Pawn to c6, doing the same thing, both sides just kind of stacking up right here. Pawn to c4, so you can start to see all the tension in the center of the board. Rook over here to d8, recognizing this is where you want your rooks in the center, especially for this particular game. It's all revolving around the center, and one of these sides is going to come out on top. Now Fabiano decides to go ahead and take on d5, kind of open it up. Pawn taking back on d5. Knight up here to f5. I really like just rook over here to c1, controlling this long open file right here. But decides to go ahead and play for a little bit more aggressive move of knight to f5. Nice little outpost for this knight right now. Bishop here to a g5 outpost, can kind of get aggressive if he wants to. Pawn up here to h4, and then bishop to d2. So Magnus Carlsen feeling a little frisky, trying to get involved into the action down here on his opponent's side. Rook up here to e2. Now pawn taking on e4, and after the pawn captures, you can kind of see Magnus Carlsen's plan right here. His d rook on d8, kind of controlling this, also protecting this bishop here on d2. So he kind of thought this through many moves ahead. So this kind of opened up exactly what Magnus Carlsen wants. Start to open up the board. He's controlling these files with his rooks right now. So things are going pretty well for Magnus Carlsen, in my opinion. Queen over here to f6. After the exchange, the bishop was attacking the queen, so want to make sure that that queen does not fall. Pawn up here to g3, just solidifying this pawn chain right here. King over here to f8. Not doing a ton on board, but just kind of a waiting move as well. Pawn up here to h5. I don't really like the pawn to h5 very much. It allows the bishop to come back here to g5. Just didn't really have to do it, but you know, that's okay. Then pawn up here to a4, pawn to b4. I really don't like this from Magnus Carlsen. Pawn to b4, this pawn right here, it doesn't really have any defense, and Fabiano decides immediately just to play pawn to a5, which is what he should do, because if Magnus Carlsen plays pawn to a5, he has a nice solid pawn chain right here. But after pawn to a5, it's just going to be difficult for this pawn to really have any defense. Now, if he wanted to kind of play a rook here to d4, he first needs to make sure he gets this knight off the board. So maybe bishop here to c8, and then take the knight here on f5, and then he can get his rook down here to d4. But it's still kind of awkward. All in all, this pawn is just kind of sitting there for Fabiano to take. So I definitely don't like that from Magnus Carlsen. Wish he would have just taken. Let's go back and say, okay, if he does take, then all of a sudden the bishop comes up here to c4. But this is fine. He's going to be okay on material. So all in all, didn't like it as much. But pawn to b4, pawn up here to a5, king back here to g8. Not doing too much with his kings right now. But bishop here to c4. Rook down here to d7, not going to be able to stop this threat. Rook up here to a4, now threatening to take the pawn here on b4 that is now left undefended. King over here to h8, so Magnus Carlsen using a lot of his moves to just move his king back and forth. The rook decides to go ahead and take here on b4, and then pawn to g6 after the exchange. The knight is forced to move, but first we're going to see the queen come over here. Now after the bishop comes down here to c6, just because the rook was attacking with the queen as backup here. After the bishop to c6, now we see the knight come back here to e3. We see the bishop recapture here on e4. So equalizing in material, I think Fabiano has a much better position on board. This next move is a pretty tricky one. Fabiano decided to go ahead and play bishop here to d5. I think that's a really inferior move. He didn't have much time on board, so that's kind of the thing as you are analyzing these. You recognize that Fabiano, being one of the best players in the world, can probably find bishop here to b5, but it's not the easiest find by any means. In this particular case, the pawn takes here on b5, the rook swings over here, taking here on e4, since it was a discovered attack once the bishop moved, and then the queen is kind of threatening right here. This is now a pass pawn that's going to be very difficult for black to deal with the rest of the game. I think Magnus Carlsen is going to have a tough time defending this on board. Fabiano kind of went for a safer play, played bishop here to d5. Definitely not going to lose playing like this, but much safer than if he had a little bit more time, maybe finding that bishop here to b5. After the bishop takes, we see the knight take here on d5, queen over here to c6, knight back here to c3, queen down here to f3. So Magnus Carlsen trying his best to try to find something on board. Queen back here to c2. Rook over here to d8, just trying to try something. You know, double barreling here on the d file is always good. Rook over here to e4, just doubling up with his rooks as well. Magnus Carlsen has a last-ditch effort with rook down here to d2. See if Fabiano will make a mistake. Unfortunately for Magnus Carlsen, that's exactly what Fabiano does. It doesn't seem like he recognized that the bishop was here on g5, was running out of time. What's interesting is that after this next move, after 40 moves, which is kind of where we're at right now, where this is move 39, after each player moves their next move, they have another hour extended. So they have 2 hours for the first 40 moves, and then after move 40, they get another hour. Unfortunately for Fabiano, he made a disastrous play and played rook taking on d2. Just did not see this bishop here on g5, I think. That's got to be the only way that this makes any sense. After rook down here to d2, there's just no stopping Magnus Carlsen now. Can't take back with his queen. The bishop's just going to come down. So all in all, this is going to be very bad. Threatening check right now, and then checkmate. So Magnus Carlsen, very, very easy victory from here. So Fabiano, after he had only a few moves ago, kind of the lead, kind of went down a drawish path, I think, kind of a safe route. But no way he should have lost that. Played a bad move. Magnus Carlsen goes on to take the victory. So Magnus Carlsen, first 2 games, I don't really feel like he's playing as well as he could for sure. I think he squeaked out a win in round 2 that we just covered. So hopefully he can get back on track. I think it's generous for him to have a win right now. Fabiano following the first 2 games, it's going to be tough for him to defend his title. Last year he won the first 7 rounds, which is just absurd to think about, and for him to lose the first 2 this time, it's got to be very disappointing for him, especially playing Magnus Carlsen playing so well. But hopefully you guys enjoyed round 2, 2 of the top players in the world, 2 of the youngsters playing so well. So we'll see you guys in the next video, and thanks for watching.